So last week, Ryan introduced our series called Learning to Lament. And Ryan talked to us about what lament is, and he also talked about the 4 steps of lament. And these 4 steps come out of a book called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, and they're up on the screen behind me. And the idea is that they're 4 steps, and so you go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. And so step 1 is turning to God in prayer. And step 2 is complaining to God. Step 3 is asking God. And step 4 is trusting God. Now today, we're at the beginning of our series, and so what we're going to do is we are going to focus on step 1, turning to God in prayer. Now, I couldn't buy 2 sets of magnets for everybody that's sitting in the room, but when Ryan gets a chance, he'll just pass it to someone. If you could just pass it to the next person and sort of let it S-bend around the church. There's a few, so maybe 1 per column, row, section is probably a better word. And what you've probably done this before, I think you guys know what I'm going to say. Most of you done something like this before in school, where you get the magnets and you can either face the black and black together or the white and white together. And when you face the same color together, you will feel this resistance. This resistance that's actually stopping the magnets from actually touching and coming close together. And then what I want you to do is I want you to flip one of them over so you have an opposite color, one white and one black. And then I want you to feel sort of like the click of them drawing near and coming together. And at the end of my message, I'm going to talk a little bit about those 2 things. And throughout my message, I'm going to reference those 2 things. So just, you might want to play with it for 30 seconds to 1 minute, but I just want you to have that experience of feeling those 2 different reactions. And so why we talk about lament today, not Lent, lament, you might be thinking, you know what, lament, this doesn't sound like a fun series. This doesn't sound like something that I want to do or I want to go through. And so first of all, I want to talk about, well, why? Why are we talking about lament? You see, one of the reasons why we're talking about lament is because we feel like it's timely. I'm not sure how you're feeling at the moment, but as I look out to the world, as I look out into my community, and as I go through my own life, you sort of feel like it's like one crisis after another, right? We're in this season of crisis, and then, maybe like an hour break, and then another crisis, another crisis and another crisis. And this isn't just in one person's life, but it's happening in individuals' life. It's happening on a community level, on a national level, on a global level. And so one of the reasons why talking about lament is important is because it is so timely at the moment. You see, and if we're going to be facing these crises, which I believe in life we're going to, even hopefully they might slow down, but crises are going to come. We live in a broken world, and so we can't avoid crisis and we can't avoid pain. And so I think it's essential that we actually learn how to lament, because lament actually helps build a strong faith. You see, crisis can break us or crisis can build us. And so I think that if we learn to lament, it actually helps us to be able to build a strong faith. You see, I think as a church, if we don't learn how to lament, then we will lose our faith. Or we will end up with a false faith, a faith that says one thing, but deep down believes another. Or we will end up with a fragile faith, a faith that sort of every time a little bump in the road comes, our faith will sort of falter again and again and again. But church, I believe the world around us, they don't need Christians have a false faith or a fragile faith. The world around us needs people that have a strong faith. And one of the last reasons I think it's so important for us to learn how to lament, I truly believe that when we learn to sit in our own pain, it means that we can actually sit with others in their pain. Once someone asked me So at the hub, we do community lunch. And one thing that I did very straight away was at lunchtime, I would go and I would sit and I would talk to people. And it was incredible when I sat and had a meal with them, the stories that came out. And someone said to me, how do you do that, Rachel? How do you sit with them and have that story come out? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not really sure. And I was trying to think of a book that I could recommend. Like, did I read a book that taught me about it? And I wasn't sure. But it was funny, as I've reflected on this series, I've realized that as I have learned to sit in my own pain, it's actually helped me then to sit in others' pain. And I think that's such a powerful thing. And I think for me, it's because I knew that Jesus sat with me in my pain. And that's why I could sit there. And it's why I can go and sit in other people's pain. But I want to shift the focus from others, and I want to put the focus on me a little bit. And I want to share you a story from my life. And this story is actually how lament saved my faith. You see, it would have been awesome if I'd heard this series beforehand, but I hadn't. And so I just had to stumble across learning how to lament for myself. But I truly believe that if I did not learn how to lament, then I wouldn't be a Christian right now. My faith would be broken. And at best, it would be fragile. You see, one day I walked into a day, and I don't know if you've ever had a day where you wake up and you think it's going to be just like any other day, but then you hear something or something happens to you and you feel like it shifts and changes your life forever. See, I was about 24 years old, and I went to hang out with my older sister and my younger sister. And I thought, we're just going to go and, there's a few kids running around and we'll just, do the sisterly thing. But my younger sister, I've already told this story once this morning, so I'm already getting emotional about it. But my younger sister said, I want to talk to you guys about something. And so we sort of sensed that it was a little bit of a deeper thing. And so my brother-in-law took the kids, and me and my older sister went into a room and we closed the door. And all three of us were just sitting on the floor. And my younger sister said, for the last 10 years, I've been having these memories of Granddad coming into my room at night and sexually assaulting me. And in that moment, two things happened. One thing, I felt like I just broke. Something inside of me just broke. I've never been angry like that before. I know, I dropped the F-bomb instantly, which isn't like me. But I was just full of so much anger, and there was something inside my heart that just broke. And the other thing is that I just knew in an instant that this had happened. I knew that this had happened because it was only a few years before that I found out that my grandfather had done it to other people. And so here I was in this space, and if I could describe how I felt like with God, it was that feeling of when you have the white magnet and the white magnet against each other. And after I found this out, I felt like every time I went to God, there was this tension, there was this resistance, like I couldn't actually connect with him anymore. Every time I would sit down and I would try to open my Bible, I would just be filled with anxiety. Every time I tried to pray, I just felt like I just wanted to run away. And so I was like this for a little while until one day I was on a retreat. And this retreat was all about spending time with God. And I was sort of drawn into this space, and I sat down. And I finally decided that I was going to say to God the things that I was actually thinking and feeling. You see, for so long, I just played the good Christian card. I just wanted to say, yes, I trust you, God. I believe in you. I hope in you. That's what I had to say. But this day I decided, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. And I said to God, you know what, God, I don't believe in you anymore. I think it's just done. I don't believe in you. And you know what, if you are there, if you are real and if you are there, I don't think that you're good. I don't trust you and I don't like you. How could you let this happen? You see, in that moment when I finally just was honest with God and told him exactly how I was feeling, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was lamenting. I was lamenting, and it was that space that actually saved my faith. It wasn't the good, hope-filled, faith-filled Christian that saved my faith. It was the honest Rachel. It was just coming before God like a child does and can just be honest. And you see, my story of lament is not the only story of lament. I know that there's many lament stories sitting here just in this room. And we know that the Bible, Ryan said last week, that the Bible is full of stories of lament. And so I want to look at one of these stories today. And it comes from Psalm 77. And Psalm 77 doesn't actually give us the details of what was going on in this person's life. We don't know what events happened. It could be that they've lost someone that they've loved. Maybe they're a king and they're in a big war and their nation's about to fall. Or maybe they're hiding behind a rock and a lion's about to jump out and eat them. We don't know what's happening for this person. But what we do know is that he was in an intense amount of suffering and pain because of the words that are written. And so what I want to do is I want to read this psalm to you. And I'm just curious that as you listen to it, if you can hear the shifts, if you can hear the steps of lament as we go through the psalm. So let's read this together. I'm not going to read the whole psalm. I'm going to read verses 1 to 12. This is what it said. It says, I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord at night. I stretched out untiring hands, and I would not be comforted. I remembered you, God, and I groaned. I meditated, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the years of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart meditated, and my spirit asked, will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. I'll remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds. Could you guys hear the shifts in that pattern? He went from turning to God. He went to complaining to God. And then we heard all those questions and he was asking God. And then we hear that shift to faith, to trust. I will reflect on what you've done in the past and I will trust you. Now I want to ask you a question, right? If you could pick these, if you had these 4 steps, right? Turning to God, complaining to God, asking God, trusting God. If you could choose, right? If you could choose which step to be in, what step would you choose? All right, take about 5 seconds and tell someone sitting near you. Would you choose step 1, step 2, step 3, or step 4? Go, talk. All right, can you guys yell out to me, what was the answer, your answer, your partner's answer? Which step? Step 1, 2, 3. All right, that's a good idea. Everyone show me the numbers on their hands. What would we choose? I'm seeing a lot of 4s around the room. Not everyone, but I'm seeing mostly 4s, right? You see, I think if we could choose where we wanted to be, we would want to be trusting in God. Of course, that's where we want to be. That's the place that feels good. It might not feel perfect, but it feels much better to be trusting in God than to feeling like the world is falling out because this God who's meant to be strong and I'm meant to love and I'm meant to like is actually quite awful. That's not a good place to be. We don't want to be there. But if I were to ask you another question, right? Where are you right now? Where are you right now? And I won't get you to show it, but I could guarantee that there wouldn't be as many 4s in the room, right? You see, today I want us to focus on step 1. I want us to focus on step 1 because we are at the beginning of our series. And step 1 is where we should begin at the start of our pain. Right? And step 1 is where we should begin in the start of our pain. You see, if we are at the beginning of our pain and we want to go straight to step 4, like we want to leapfrog all the way to step 4. I was tempted to get 2 volunteers to come out and like one leapfrog over each other, but then I thought, oh, someone might get hurt and we might get sued. So I won't. But just imagine, leapfrogging over someone, right? If we want to leapfrog from the beginning of our pain all the way to trust, then we're doing something that Ryan has used before, a much fancier term than leapfrog, is that we are spiritual bypassing. Right? We are spiritual bypassing. We're just trying to go from the good to the good to the good to the good. But when we do that, yes, we're missing out on the suffering, but we're also missing out on the transformation. You see, if we are not willing to go to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, then we will end up with either no trust, a false trust, or a fragile trust. And do you know what that leads to? That type of trust leads to either no faith, a false faith, or a fragile faith. You see, if I never took that time to open up to God and to tell him truly what I was feeling. You see, I was so scared to say the words out loud, I don't believe in you. So scared to say them. I was so scared to say the words out loud, I don't like you. You're not good. But you see, when I finally just said it to God, that's where the freedom began. I think God is so amazing. I think he's so amazing because you know what? He doesn't expect us to trust him at the beginning of our pain. Right? He doesn't expect us to trust him at the beginning of our pain. All he's asking us is to turn to him in prayer. And so as we head into a time of application, I hope that has everyone had a chance to feel the magnets in their hand? Feel that sort of resistance, that pushing away, and then feeling that like clicking to and drawing near. You see, every time we go through pain, they are the choices that we have in front of us. You see, we can turn away from God. We can have that resistance there, that feeling of I can't get near to him. And I think if that's the case, it's for 2 reasons. It's because we either can't trust him or we can't be honest with him. But church, I want to remind you today that God doesn't expect us to always trust him. You see, that's what Psalm 77 is teaching us today. Right? The psalmist didn't start in a place of trust. He actually just started in a place of pain. Did you hear that when it said, I thought of God, I remembered you, God, and I groaned? Does that sound like something a Christian says? No, we're meant to think of God and smile, aren't we? But no, Psalm 77 is in the Bible because God is saying it is okay. It is okay to doubt. It is okay to question. It is okay to be angry, and it is okay to be mad. This is actually a great place to start. Because if we do that, rather than pushing away from God, we will actually draw near to him. I have another question for you. When I shared my story with you just a moment ago, and when I was honest with you, did you want to turn away from me or did you want to turn to me? Turn to me. I hope so. You see, that's what honesty does. It actually draws us towards people. And our God is no different. When we are honest with him, we will actually be drawn closer to him. And so I want to leave you with today is I want to give you a question to reflect on, 1 thing to remember, and 2 ways to respond. And now this is the part where I would love I would love to see you take out your camera and take photos of the slides. I would love to see you get out your pen and your paper and write down what I have to say. Because at the end of the day, church, it comes down to, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? And so I just want to give you some ideas today. And so one of the ideas is I have a question for you to reflect on, right? And the question is, when I go through pain, what is my initial reaction? Do I push away like the magnets when it's the same color? I know there's a fancy word for that. If there's a science teacher in the room, they're probably going, it's because of the polar things, right? Do I push away or do I draw near? What is my initial reaction? And then I want you to ask a follow-up question, and that is why. Right? So once you answer it, ask the question why. And I think this question is so powerful. You see, I asked this question why. Why am I pushing away from God after I had found out what happened with my sister? And the answer didn't come in a moment. It was a journey. But it was actually something that was really powerful. You see, for me, the reason why I was struggling to connect with God is because my grandfather actually reminded me of God. Right? I had these two people connected. You see, as I grew up, no one had remembered the things that my grandfather had done to them for many, many years. And so I spent the first 17 years of my life looking up to my grandfather. He was an elder in the church. It was a 3-hour drive to their place. So I remember every time we left their house, we would gather around and we'd stand in a circle and he'd raise his hand and he'd ask the angels to protect our car as we drove home. And as a little girl, you looked up at that and thought, wow, this man has a great faith. I also remember being a teenager, and whenever I would come to the Bible and there would be a part that stumbled me and I didn't understand, I would remember that, and when I would see my grandparents, I would go to them and say, what does this mean? Can you explain this to me? And they taught me a lot about the Bible and about my faith. And so you see, as a child, I thought my grandfather was this great godly man. But as I grew up, I heard these stories of another side, this dark side that I didn't realize he had. And so I didn't realize it, but that was how I was feeling about God. I was feeling like, God, as a child, I thought you were great. I thought you were good. I could trust in you. But where's that dark side I haven't seen yet? You're saying you're good, but I bet you're bad. It's going to come out soon. And you see, once I figured that out, once I had that awareness, that was actually really powerful for me. Because all of a sudden I realized, of course God is not like my grandfather. Of course, they are different. They are opposite. God is good. And so I think that question of why can be so powerful. But maybe your answer to why might be different. Maybe you turn away from God because there's an easier answer. You see, when we take our pain to God, he says, let me sit in there with you. He says, let me sit there with you and let's stay there for a while. When we think about Jesus and what he went through at the cross, when Jesus turned to God, he didn't go, nope, sorry, you don't have to do that. Let me take that pain away. God didn't take the pain away. There was a process that had to go through. Jesus had to go through the pain before transformation can come. But you see, this world can offer us a way out. We can turn to things like alcohol, because alcohol doesn't tell us to sit in the pain. It tells us to ignore the pain. But it definitely won't bring transformation. Or what about going to the shops and buying fancy new things? Right? That doesn't tell us to stay in the pain. It tells us to ignore the pain. But it doesn't bring transformation. What about, I'm guilty of this one, go and eat some chocolate or some ice cream. That doesn't tell you to stay in the pain. It tells you to ignore the pain. It feels good in the moment, but it definitely doesn't lead to transformation. So why don't you take some time to ask these questions? When I go through pain, what is my initial reaction and why? And the one thing for you to remember today, now it is like a habit of mine to talk a lot. I think you all know me by now. I talk a lot. So I like to leave you with at least one thing to remember. If there is one thing that you can remember today, it's this. If you are not ready to turn to God in trust, then turn to Him in prayer. Right? If you are not ready to turn to God in trust, then just turn to Him in prayer. And let me remind you that our prayers don't always need to be faith-filled. You see, Psalm 77 is a prayer, and it doesn't start with, God, you're awesome. God, you're amazing. I trust you. I hope in you. No, it starts with, when I think about you, I groan. Why won't you let me sleep? I just want to close my eyes. So when we turn to Him in prayer, they don't need to be prayers of faith. They don't need to be prayers of hope. They don't need to be prayers of trust. They just need to be an honest prayer. You know, to truly lament is to go one step at a time. One step at a time. And as it comes to the time to respond, 2 ways that you can respond. Right? A nice, simple, easy way that you can respond now is that this week you can take some time to read Psalm 77. And if you want to, really get into it, you could read it every single day, and you could do it in a different translation so that you start to understand this psalm a little bit more and more and more. And my hope and prayer would be that as you read through this psalm, that it's almost like you were writing a pattern on your heart, so that when you go through pain, you can respond in this way. And a way we can respond may be for later, and it might be for now for you. But the next time you experience intense suffering, I want to encourage you to have a go at writing your own Psalm 77. Have a go at writing your own Psalm 77. Okay, and I would encourage you to not finish it in one sitting. Because I don't know about you, but when we go through intense pain, it actually takes me a while to build trust. Think about your earthly relationships, right? When something breaks, when there's a shift. If someone really, really badly hurts you, you're not going to go, in the next 24 hours, okay, I trust you again. Right? It's going to take time to build that. And that can happen in our relationship with God. It's okay. If I took time to write this Psalm 77 back in that season when I was journeying through what happened to my sister, it would have taken me about 12 months to get to that place of trust. But that's okay, because we have a gracious God. We have a God that knows how to respond to pain. We have a God who knows how to sit in our pain. And we have a God who knows how to see through our pain. Right? And I'm not going to guarantee transformation within 24 hours or even within 12 months. But I can guarantee you that if you turn to God in prayer, that He will be with you, that He will sit with you, that He will be present with you, that He will journey with you, that He will listen to your complaints, that He will let you ask all of your questions. And I can promise you that He will eventually bring transformation in your life. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to pray, and then we're going to have one last song of worship. And I'm wondering if there's anyone sitting in the room that has that sense that they're like the magnets that are the same color. They're in that place in their life where they're thinking, I'm trying to get close to God, but I feel like there's this resistance and I just can't do it. And so I'm going to be available, and Ryan will be available, and any of the elders that want to jump up. And we can just pray for you. We can stand beside you and turn with you to God in prayer this morning. And if you don't want to pray with us, that's fine. There might be someone else in the room that you want to pray with. Or you might want to go home, and you might want to find a quiet place, and you might want to pray a lament prayer to yourself. But my encouragement today is that if you're experiencing pain, just start by turning to God in prayer. Let's pray together now. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for who you are. Lord, I am so thankful that you are big enough to hold any of our troubles, any of our pain, any of our darkness, any of our sorrow. Lord, I thank you for the way that you would just simply be present with us. And Lord, I'm praying and asking that as a church that you fill each and every one of us with courage. The courage to turn to you with honesty. The courage to find safety in your arms. Lord, may your Holy Spirit be drawing each and every one of us closer to you. In your Son's name, amen.